Good evening, everyone. Welcome to IKG's Wisdom Wednesday. We are so happy to have you. I am the IKG Wisdom Wednesday coordinator, Sister Ajwa, and we are pleased that you are here. We know that you're placing in the chat just some information about you, where you're from, just so that we could interact with you and just be aware of who we have in the house. We're very pleased that being able to host virtually, we're able to have so many people from around the world join us. So I would like to start off by letting everyone know that Wisdom Wednesday is a free lecture series hosted by IKG every third Wednesday of the month. IKG also hosts other cultural activities that we encourage you to learn more about and participate in. So you can go to our webpage, ikgculturalresourcecenter.com, to learn more. A couple of events that I would like to share with you are the Egypt on Potomac walking field trips, and you can learn more about that on the website, as well as a special program taking place this Sunday. It's called Brother to Brother, a conversation with Renoko Rashidi and Tony Browder, the founder of IKG. They will be discussing brotherhood, fatherhood, and their work. That will take place again this Sunday, June 20th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And in the chat, Atlantis Browder will be placing the link to register for this webinar. All right, so that link to register will be in the webinar. If you're not on the IKG listserv, you can join the listserv by going to our website, ikgculturalresourcecenter.com, and clicking on the Contact Us link or tab, and you will be able to have access to all of our, sign up for our listserv, and then be informed of all of the events that we host over at the center. So tonight's program, we are very ecstatic and happy to have with us our very dear brother, Dr. Jeff Menzise, who have presented several Wisdom Wednesday lectures, as well as a Wisdom Wednesday Saturday Seba series, where it was a more in-depth look at some of the topics that he talks about. So a little bit about our speaker. Dr. Jeff Menzise is a proud graduate of two of our finest HBCUs, receiving his bachelor's and master's degrees from Fisk University in psychology and clinical psychology, respectively. He finished up his academic training at Howard University, majoring in clinical psychology with a minor in developmental psychology. Along with his PhD, Menzies earned a graduate certificate in international studies with a concentration in political science and information and culture. Dr. Menzies is active globally and locally. A native of Cincinnati, Ohio, he maintains his professional and social ties to his hometown by serving as a consultant to several grassroots organizations, educators, and his fraternal lodge, St. John's Number 3, PHA. He has worked with ministries of education in both the Caribbean and West Africa, providing professional development for teachers, administrators, families, students, and mental health staff. He is currently an associate professor with the Morgan State University Institute for Urban Research and the immediate past president of the Association of Black Psychologists, DC chapter. Tonight, Dr. Menzies will speak on Reclaiming Our Stolen Legacy, Revisiting George G.M. James in Light of Prince Hall Masonry. Dr. Menzies states, in his classic book, Stolen Legacy, George J.M. James presents a vast amount of knowledge and information about ancient African history, its relationship to Greek philosophy, and the impact that it has on us today. Many who critique this powerful and enlightening work have done so from an intellectual and historical perspective. Some have found issue with the accuracy of some of the information, while others have refuted the overall notion that Africans gave birth to Greek civilization. One analysis that he also presents, ironically, this is one analysis that seems to be missing is of the spiritual and initiation legacy that he also presents. Ironically, this is an aspect of ancient African life that made the cultural, political, intellectual, and other accomplishments possible. This presentation is devoted to such an exploration. Throughout this presentation, Dr. Menzise will make connections to the 3 degrees of becoming a master mason as he explores the stages in stolen that are highlighted in Stolen Legacy. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to broaden our understanding of what our current capabilities are by referencing ancient wisdom. So we are so happy and pleased to welcome Dr. Menzise here tonight. And as he's coming on screen, just want to shout out our audience members coming from, of course, DC and Maryland and Virginia, the DMV. We have New Jersey, California, Florida, Orlando, Danbury, Connecticut. I'm from Connecticut, so yes, Connecticut. Texas, Georgia, Trinidad.
Hey,
yes. Let's see, New York. We got New York in the house. Again, Chicago, more Florida, more Californians. All right, New York City is kind of representing here tonight. Tennessee, we got Tennessee in the house. All right, different parts of Georgia, so folks from all over Georgia. Just want to acknowledge you again and just thank you all for joining us this evening. This will definitely prove, South Carolina, welcome. This will definitely prove to be a very enlightening evening. If you would like to interact with each other, there is the chat box. However, if you would like questions that you have to be answered from our presenter, we ask that you place them in the Q&A box. So that is a different box from the chat box. So yes, any questions, please place them in the Q&A box. And welcome folks from Philly and other parts of Pennsylvania. And Dr. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, good sister. As always, much love and appreciation, Sister Ajwa, and to the IKG family, Sister Atlantis, big brother, Baba Tony Browder. Much love to all you all. It's been way, way too long. I mean, this daggone Rona thing got us distant, got us talking to each other through screens these days. And, you know, adaptability is a sure sign of survival. So, you know, we are thriving. We're still making it happen. I want to say what's up to everybody out there that's checking us out, either streaming from Facebook or right here in Zoom with us. Thank you all for showing up this evening for tonight's conversation. You know, in true me fashion, I always try to fit as much as possible in to whatever amount of time I'm given, and invariably I always do too much. So, you know, I'm gonna try to get through this without rushing and without, you know, going too quickly past certain bits of information. But I'm very, very excited and anxious to get to the part to where, you know, I get a chance to see what you all are thinking and what your questions are so that I can answer those to the best of my ability. Want to give special shout out, you know, to our ancestors, of course, to the Most High, which is to me the ancestor of all ancestors. Specifically want to shout out Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, one of my elders and ancestors near and dear to my heart. Much love to you, Dr. Welsing, and you know, everybody else whose shoulders I'm standing on. I really appreciate this opportunity to share what insight I've gained. So tonight, what I'll be doing is presenting, as Sister Ajwa said, I'll be presenting about George G.M. James's Stolen Legacy. And this is the cover I got. I know everybody probably got a different cover on their version, depending on which version you got. But this is the version I got. It's George D.M. James's Stolen Legacy and how it relates to Prince Hall Freemasonry. And so I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna share my screen. And, you know, in true me fashion, I've got a lot of images in my presentation. It's not very word heavy. And at times I might actually go to the text itself and read from the text rather than having all the words on the screen. So I hope that that is okay and that doesn't distract anybody. And so as previously mentioned, this is Reclaiming Our Stolen Legacy, revisiting George G.M. James' Stolen Legacy in light of Prince Hall Freemasonry. And I always love to open with this quote right here, because to me, this exemplifies the task ahead of us. And it exemplifies the brother George G.M. James himself, Dr. Wells, Neely Fuller, Tony Browder, Asa Hilliard. You know, the list goes on and on and on and on. Chike Okua, I mean, T. Owens Moore, the list goes on and on. Linda James Meyer. It's all about having a balance, and that's the African worldview and paradigm. And so the society that separates scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. And so the people that I just named and everybody else that you all could possibly name in this same line of work are very important, because you know we have to have a certain level of courage and heart to step up and push back against these paradigms of deception that have been imposed upon us, you know, for decades and for centuries. And so when you get people like George G.M. James, who dares to go sifting through and expose how Greek philosophy is actually African, you know, stolen African wisdom, you know, he had heart. When you have people like Dr. Francis Chris Welsing, who will look racism, white supremacy dead in the eye and call it what it is, you know, we got to pay homage to that. So these are scholars that are also warriors who are on the front line, far from cowards. And so I tip my hat to everybody that's moving in that same vein. And I strive to, you know, hopefully walk in that same light. So part of the reason why I think it's very important for us to reclaim our stolen legacy is because, one, it's been stolen from us. Like, duh, right? It's something that's been stolen. But as George G.M. James says, what it does, the theft of our legacy is more than just a taking of material or intellectual property, but it's also the stealing of an identity. And when that identity was stolen from us, when that legacy was stolen from us, it was actually replaced with one that would actually damage us. And some of you, if not many of you, have heard me speak about this identity crisis that we all are suffering from right now. Even the most conscious of us, we're still in the process of reclaiming. And so it's kind of like that. The analogy I like to use is that of Superman. And if Superman really believed he was Clark Kent, just imagine all of the strengths and the talents and the gifts and the powers that he would be forsaken. He would be a bumbling idiot, you know, somebody who works he's a reporter, you know, but he's clumsy, right? He's always dropping stuff. When actually this dude could fly so fast around the planet that he could reverse time. And so I think I say that we are like Superman or Kal-El, you know, the god name is Kal-El, who thinks he's Clark Kent. We are godly, but we think that we are just, you know, all these negative stereotypes. Of course, not all of us, but generally speaking, and even, well, I would dare say all of us to some extent at one point in time or another have been confused about our identity. And I maintain that none of us have fully been able to reclaim it and embrace it in totality to the point to where we can actually actualize the powers that are laden within that identity. And so that's why that's what motivates me to do the research and the work that I do, is for us to once again gather up a critical mass of information, a critical mass of experience, a critical mass of wisdom, a critical mass of applicable insight and information and amongst the critical mass of people, to where we can finally get to that tipping point, to where in your own personal life, you go from being quote unquote only human to being what you actually are, which is divine, right? And so when you get enough experience, information, whether it's through initiatory rites or whatever, to where you can begin to walk in this world as one who is powerful and able to manipulate and manifest reality at your will, when we get enough people that are like that, then instantaneously our situation should change, and it should change for the better. And so that's what I'm pushing for, because right now, we these little brothers right here, and shout out to Fela Kuti in that opening song. One of my favorite Fela songs is Suffering and Smiling. And that's what you see on these young brothers' faces right here. They're suffering and they're smiling while they're doing it. And that reminds me of something that recently happened, right? Where you know, we've been given this holiday of Juneteenth now. It's like, oh wow, they finally recognized Juneteenth as a national holiday. And you know, my thing is they'll give you a holiday to barbecue and get drunk, but they won't give you equal protection under the law. You know, for some strange reason, you got to be Asian to get that, right? And so, you know, it's these false celebrations. It's the suffering and smiling. And my thing is that if you don't bend over, nobody can kick you in your butt. Well, it won't be as easy. And they will have to get up off your backs, like these two little brothers got up. And so I'm doing more than just an intellectual treatment of what our stolen legacy is. I'm really, of course, I'm talking in words, and so it is an intellectual presentation. But what I'm talking about is a psycho-spiritual transformation that brings forward something that is latent within you. And that's the true definition of education. You know, it's dukare, it's duko dukare. It's you bringing out from the individual. You're bringing something that's within out. It's not the pouring in of a bunch of knowledge and information. It's a bringing out. It's a stimulating of what's within and then bringing it out so that it manifests. And so that's what I'm talking about today. That's my motivation for us to be able to get up. And it's folks that's been siphoning off of our energy, our life force, our chi, our raw force, whatever you want to call it, Kundalini, been siphoning off of it for a long, long time. And we have been purposely put in this place for this to occur. And so part of my destiny and my life purpose is to help us to reawaken, you know, by first, of course, putting my mask on. I want to pay homage to George G.M. James. He's a very, very obscure brother. I'm doing some research on, actually on brother George G.M. James, because there are some other documents that do exist. And so I've been on a hunt for them. I found several, but I'm seeking plenty more. I still got quite a few to recover. But, you know, this brother is very obscure. And I'm sure many of you all have heard the mysteries surrounding his death and all of that good stuff. And so, you know, some say that he was killed mysteriously on the road between Nashville and Arkansas. You know, he was a professor, I believe, at Arkansas State University. And for whatever reason, he was in Nashville. He was going from Nashville to Arkansas. Some people say that he died, you know, on the road. And, you know, said it was mysterious. Some people even say that he was killed, killed by Freemasons. I don't personally believe that story about him being killed by Freemasons and mysteriously on the side of the road and just disappeared. And I did a talk last week with one of my Masonic brothers, a brilliant brother named Oscar Allen, who is out of the Grand Lodge of New York, Grand Lodge of State of New York, not a Prince Hall Mason, but a brother nonetheless. And he actually provided the documentation of George G.M. James's death certificate. And so if you see here, that he died at Meharry Medical College. They had a hospital there called George W. Hubbard Hospital in Nashville. Said he was in the hospital from June the 9th to June the 30th. Brother Allen is actually he's actually an epidemiologist, so he's privy to medical. He got access to medical information, and so they said he died carcinoma of the stomach. So he has stomach cancer, is what it's called. The death is, and other significant conditions. They said he suffered an aneurysm, innominate artery, arteriosclerotic heart disease. Now, of course, we know, you know, like Brother Khalid Abdul Muhammad and other people who have suffered aneurysms and strokes, you know, mysteriously caused. And so it still could have been, you know, the conspiracy could still be correct, even though this is what the official birth certificate says. But, you know, I just thought it was a very timely and very powerful piece of information to bring to tonight's presentation, because I had never seen it until last week or earlier this week. And so I was like, let me go ahead and incorporate this into the presentation because it was very timely. So here's George. This is a copy of George G.M. James's death certificate for those who care to look at it, and his official cause of death. So the part of tonight's discussion, I think, that is perhaps most intriguing is the relationship between what George G.M. James called the stolen legacy, which is African spirituality, African culture, and what we now call Prince Hall Freemasonry. In my mind's understanding, Freemasonry is a hub. It's a hub. It's a storehouse of ancient, cultural, spiritual, intellectual, insight, information, wisdom, and practical tools, right? And therefore, it's a hub, and it consists of multicultural perspectives of just about everything. And my thing about Prince Hall branch of Freemasonry, which I'm a member of, is that we are descendants of African Lodge. It literally was called African Lodge number 1, and then turned to African Lodge 459. And us being descendants of what our ancestors called African Lodge makes me believe that those same ancestors wanted us to look to Africa for the cultural lens, the cultural context, and definitely the cultural worldview through which to view our version of Freemasonry. So what happens is, over time, you know, we eventually are practicing Prince Hall Freemasonry, or practicing Freemasonry the way that we do today, which is, from my understanding and experience, it heavily rests on the Western worldview. And so for those of us that understand worldview, we know that, the worldview makes or breaks it all. Meaning that if, for example, in worldview, we're talking about epistemology, then we're talking about, the nature of knowledge and, how knowledge is even acquired, what knowledge is and how is it acquired, measured, and all that stuff. And from the Western perspective, we have what we call the scientific method. And this whole the scientific method, science is just to know. It comes from the Latin word scio, and it's to know. And so if you're looking at something called the scientific method, it's saying that this is the only way to know things. And unfortunately, it's a very limited way to know things. But it has, through imperialism and oppression and dominance, racial dominance, racist dominance, it has been elevated to be the standard of how knowledge is acquired and what seems to be scientific treaties, right? And so, it's heavily dependent on physical world, the physical senses, the 5 physical senses. You got to be able to count and measure it. If you got to be able to duplicate it, all of these different things have to be duplicated on command. And so, all these things actually put knowledge in a very, very small category. Because we all know somebody who has, for example, if this was interactive, I would ask you all, I'm gonna ask you anyway, y'all can answer amongst yourself. If your grandmama had a dream about fish, what that mean? Right, exactly. Yep, I hear y'all. I hear all y'all saying it. Yep. Somebody pregnant. And not only is somebody pregnant, but Big Mama know how to pick up the phone and she gonna call exactly that person because she probably knows who it is as well. Right, I see the comments jumping. I'm not gonna be distracted and read the comments, but I saw it light up. It like jumped like, yep, many people chiming in, it seems like. But that's what it is. And so according to quote unquote, the method of knowing things, dreams aren't included in that. Even though Western psychologists such as Sigmund Freud, shout out to Laila Africa. He used to call him Sigmund Freud. That's another one of our great ancestors. But Sigmund Freud talked about dreams and the interpretation of dreams and how you can actually gather nice knowledge, like bona fide knowledge and insight from your dream state. But we already knew that, right? I saw several people from Tennessee in here, and I've lived in Nashville for a while. I went to Fisk and, worked at Fisk, Meharry, and TSU. And when I was there, I know my elders there in the community, they had these dream books. We go down to Haddock's Pharmacy, shout out to Nate. You go down to Haddock's Pharmacy and you buy your dream books because you understood that certain symbolism in your dreams translated into certain numbers to play in a lottery. We took our dreams very seriously. But so we understand and overstand that there are other ways to know besides the so-called scientific method. But what happens is that we can know that and have those experiences, quote unquote, trivially. But we rarely, that I know of, will elevate those same experiences and methodologies to the greater aspects of our lives. Like when it comes to acquiring a mate, acquiring a job, making business moves. We leave all that stuff in the background. That's kind of like it's like we still sneaking around, pretending to be Catholics when we actually practicing Ifa, right? It's like we still keep the cloak over, and it's understandable because it's what Mr. Fuller says. We're living he says that the entire planet is a slave ship. It's how Mr. Fuller says it. And he says that we are all in confinement. We're all prisoners of war. And so prisoners of war function in a certain way. My statement is that by reclaiming our stolen legacy, those shackles have to be loosed, right? We once again will emerge as sovereign beings. And so the wedding of George G.M. James's notion of ancient African philosophy being what the Greeks have actually, they stole it and used it as their own, and Freemasonry is to say that this is ours. No question about it as far as I'm concerned. This is our inheritance. And within this particular fraternity, if you will, exists a network and a structure through which we can function and access certain tools and resources, as well as implement other tools and resources that we acquire along the way and put it through here. And we can use it as a vehicle to literally elevate and start to break down certain chains of oppression. We'll talk about that more later. But to me, it's very important. It's very important for us to see it that way if we're going to look at it at all. Now, what you're going to find throughout the presentation, again, I'm going to show and prove how there are many of the white Masonic lodges and chapters, different organizations within Freemasonry on the white side that acknowledges this regularly. So in this image, what you have, this is right down there on 16th Street. And this is a place that Tony takes people on the Egypt on the Potomac tour. one day I was down there and I walked in the front door, and of course you've got these two Kemetic statues right here on either side. For those who don't live in DC or haven't been there, this is the building where there are two Hurramakets or sphinxes, but they look more like the griffins, but they're sphinxes out front. They're Greek, of course, Greekified sphinxes out front, and there's a step pyramid on the top of it, right? But when you walk into the entryway, these stairs are flanked by both of these Kemetic statues, and it's an amazing story about how these statues got there. These stones were actually quarried from upstate New York, and they were transported to DC via train. And the way that the story was told to me is that they laid train tracks, especially from Union Station down here to 16th Street, to drop these stones off, and then they were carved on site into these two statues of Kemetic priesthood in a meditative position. But what caught my eye, and you have to be standing in a very specific location in the foyer to actually see this. I know y'all see it because the circles are there. This is actually the throne of Auset. It's the seat that all of the ancient Kemetic deities and royalty would sit on, right? And it's on either side of this. Now, if you take too many steps into the foyer, you don't see it. If you're too far back, you don't see it. You have to be standing within a very precise range in order to see these two thrones that are here, right here, hidden in plain sight. And again, this is the Scottish Rite headquarters. So this is the headquarters for the 4th through the 32nd degree of Freemasonry, right? Well, first, 4th through 33rd degree of Freemasonry. And it's the one that's right there on 16th Street. And so whenever I encounter brothers who try to say that, who immediately try to, in knee-jerk fashion, dismiss the notion that there is a relationship between Freemasonry and African spiritual traditions, I typically would just stop the discussion on my end, because that just means that they are either intentionally not wanting to have this conversation, or they have really come up with that conclusion. And to me, it's too obvious that there is a relationship. And understanding what I do from the psychological end of things, I know that when you can do something in a culturally relevant fashion, whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to do it better, because there's going to be more interest in it. It's going to resonate more with you. And especially when you're talking about spirituality, right? And that's why it's so important for, as Dr. Wells has said, for them to have changed the color of Jesus to make it a white man, because then that makes God white. And that means that white people will be closer to God, and those non-white people will be further from God. And so when you can replace, and reclaim our position in all of this greatness, then it does something for our identity. It does something for our movement in life, right? Because that's what identity informs. It informs how you move in life. And so if we're thinking that I ain't gonna cuss, but if you're thinking we N words, B words, and H words, and all other kind of words, as opposed to being divinely created, human beings, then we're gonna act according to that. And it will become susceptible to any and everything they want to throw at us. And here's the image of the throne that I was just showing y'all there. So you can see the same throne here. Another image that you're going to find in DC, this is in the Washington Monument, or the Tekken, right? And I showed Tony this picture. This is in my book, Symbolic Speaking. I said, man, how you get that angle? I had a super lens. I held my arms way up high so I could get it through that top window. But you see here, the Hurramaket, that's the Sphinx. Why am I blocking the name of the, forgive me, y'all. I'm blocking the name of the winged sun disk. Forgive me, because I know it. But anyway, this is an image that's indicating the ascension of George Washington, his spiritual ascension, right? He's enlightened. You see the wings here on the sun disk, and you see the serpents. Somebody typed it down there. I'm not going to be distracted by the comments, but that's what this is about, the spiritual ascension of George Washington. And that's why it's in the Washington Monument, which is a Tekken. Some say is a phallic symbol, and it has many, many meanings, which one of which is the excited and elevated life force. The other one, because it comes from the earth and points to the heaven, it's also considered to be like a ray upon which your spirit can travel to the heavens. But it's all a symbol of ascension and being more than just typical. Forgive me for forgetting that name. This is also down here in the nation's capital, right? It's down in the Capitol. And this is a statue. This is the same statue that sits on the top of the Capitol building, right? And if you look closely, you see some people say that she had an eagle sitting on top of her head. And this reminds me of Auset's crown, where you see the bird on Auset's crown, the wings that come down on the side of her head. But what this actually is not a bird on her crown. This is literally a morphosis. She is morphing, right? This is one with her. It's not just a part of her crown. And that's a lot of what you see in our ancient Kemetic traditions. which is, the quote unquote animal headed people, right? And all of this is indicative of a certain cognitive state, right? It reflected a certain cognitive state. It reflects certain cognitive ability. It reflects certain personality traits and dispositions is what it's about. But again, this is all in our tradition. Here's a similar type of rendering of that same concept and that same notion, right? Right. Of course, this is on the crown, but this is a young man, an initiate, sitting in the silence, finger like silence, contemplation, some interpret it as. And behind him, he has Horus or Heru, the hawk. And some interpret this to be that the hawk is there in protection. It's in protection mode. Some interpret it to say that this is his consciousness. He has elevated his consciousness to match that of the Neteru, and therefore is able to gain the insight and the wisdom and the lessons that this particular Neter has to teach. And so as many other, and others say that this is actually his soul, right? It's his soul elevating, and you can see it external to his body. One thing that I've come to understand is that our person, our spirit, and our soul extends beyond our physical vehicle. And that's how, for example, your immune system, it's not just the white blood cells within your body, but it's also an energy force that surrounds your body. And so if we were like dealing with Christianity today, then we would talk a little bit about that scripture that says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And the ability to have that level of protection is actually an extension of your immune system. And so when we talk about the extension of immune system, we got a couple of slides down. I'll talk about it briefly on the Tree of Life as presented by Ron F. Amen in the Medu Netter Volume 1. One of the things that helps me to further say with full confidence that this is something for us to reclaim is the heavy reliance on symbolism of Freemasonry. When you look at our African traditions, we are heavy on symbolism. There's a brother named Greg Ridley. I'm sorry, Edgar Ridley. I'll call him Greg. Edgar Ridley. He's the author of the book An African Answer, and he also has various books on symbolism. But Brother Ridley, we talk all the time, and he has this thing where he says that symbolism is actually the reason for the downfall. And my statement, my response, my retort is that symbolism is not the reason for the fall. Maybe lacking in the ability to interpret symbols might be a part of the fall, but definitely not the use of symbol. Because to me, even to interpret symbolism, to create symbolism, it requires a next level of thinking. And symbols are very efficient tools for delivering complex messages. Like, for example, this duafi here, it's literally a wooden comb. But embedded in that symbol of the wooden comb is what? The whole concept of beauty, the whole concept of versatility, right? The whole concept of creativity. It's almost like Oshun in a symbol, if you will, right? It's the duafi. There's levels to the Jinyami. And we always say, accept God, fear nothing except God. But another part of that embedded in that symbol is the notion that we don't fear God because we are God, and God is everything. And fearing God cannot occupy the same place at the same time. Shout out to the brother Bruce Willis, W. Bruce Willis, who's got the Adinkra dictionary out there. That's a good elder. I ain't seen him in a while. Shout out to you, brother Willis. But he does a wonderful job at breaking these down, and he has the pronunciation, and he will cuss you out if you pronounce it wrong. Ask me how I know. Brother Willis has blessed me several times with the correction on how I pronounce some of those symbols. But continue with the symbolism. And so when we look at the various symbols, when we look at, for example, on this page, we're talking about astronomy, which is one of the 7 liberal arts. We're talking about our use of symbolism as it relates to our spiritual growth and development. We can trace all this back to our ancient ancestors. For example, the Temple of Dendera, where they have the zodiac on the ceiling there, right? It's nothing, none of this stuff is new to us. It's just that we have been taught or forced or otherwise coerced to abandon our understanding of these deep sciences, right? And so they pack down these whole, if I showed you this Aries symbol, you all could come with pages and pages of interpretations of what it means to be an Aries or a Taurus or a Gemini or a Cancer. Some of y'all like, oh, avoid them, avoid that. Oh, that's my sign. It's various characteristic traits that come with each one of these symbols. And astronomy being one of the 7 liberal arts, when you look at it for what it is, astronomy is literally applied astrology. Astronomy is looking at the heavens, and astrology is the applied version of that, right? Of the heavenly influences. And so the two, they really go hand in hand. But we have been taught to forsake and abandon those sciences. as it applies to our everyday lives. And a part of that, again, is to do what Dr. Welson calls create us as functional inferiors. She says that the whole system of racism and white supremacy is designed to create functional inferiors out of otherwise great and superior people. And so again, the theft and the stealing of our goods, of our intellectual, our cultural, and identity-based resources is more than just, something for us to just go back and just take so we can have it in our possession. But it's actually something that will restore us, to the wholeness that is ours to embrace. And so we're shifting now and getting into the presentation that we're going to start dealing with a little bit more specifically with George G.M. James, the Stolen Legacy, as well as Freemasonry. But building up to that, I'm going to talk about how there are a lot of things that are broken down into 3 levels, right? There's an article that I wrote about the Beehive, which is used as a Masonic symbol. And my approach in true African-centered fashion was to not only look at the beehive, which is the symbol, but to actually break down the bees that create the hive, that the hive exists for. And you see 3 stages to this. And I'm not going to go too deep into that article because I'm always trying to be conscious of the time. But when you're looking at the 3 levels, there are 3 levels to almost everything. Anything that's worth something is going to have at least 3 levels to it. And so each one of these levels, as I presented in my article, relates to, some aspect of Freemasonry. When you look at Ra Nefer Amen's rendering of the Tree of Life, you see he breaks it down into 3 levels: the Sahu, the Eb, and the Ba. And what you see is on each one of these 3 levels, you have different stages of growth and development. This is one of the spiritual orders that I was initiated into, was the Osiris Set Society. Some of y'all know that when I was a student up at Howard, working on a PhD in clinical psychology, during the day, I was up at the Het Neter, under the tutelage of Orwa Hehi Medu Ryan Comet, in the priesthood up there, being trained into the priesthood. And so it was about the spiritual growth and the spiritual development of human beings, right? And I maintain that this is the very tradition that is in part housed in Freemasonry. And my position is that because it's such a universal order, and I know somebody gonna try to revoke my black card for saying this next thing, that this could potentially be for our organizing and social structure what Kiswahili would be as a universal language, if you will. Now, before y'all start logging off and and firing shots, what I'm saying is that because it's already global, if people that were African-centered in their consciousness made the decision to go into the craft of Freemasonry with that African-centered consciousness, right, complete with you all's authentic ritual systems, right? I'm talking about like you are really into your African spirituality, you're living according to it, you're using your rituals for whatever degree, whether you're going over there by Nana Kwabena and them, and you're getting your works done over there, you're going up to the Het, getting your work done over there, you're going over to EI, getting your works done. However you are living your African spirituality, if you took that same wisdom and power and funneled it, through something such as funneled it through a structure such as Freemasonry, the change would be so swift and so quick because the lodge itself is so connected. The lodge itself is very powerful, right? And again, the lodge itself is ours, to reclaim, if you will. More on that later. By taking this reclamation seriously and by elevating yourself, like really going and doing the work and elevating yourself, an image like this speaks volumes, right? I know some of us already recognize it. We've got Shu, we've got Geb, and we've got Newt or Tef Newt at the top, right? And some people say, you know the story that Geb and Newt were separated, blah, blah, blah. I'll shoot. And when I started meditating on this symbol, doing some of my degree work and meditating on the symbol, and it came back to me to recognize that Geb is, earth, physical body. Newt is your spirit, it's the sky goddess, if you will. She's your spirit. And Shu, the air, the atmosphere is what's separating the two, right? And what I walked away with in this understanding, and I've run it past plenty of my elders, and everybody's like, whoa, that's deep, is that Shu also represents the breath. And it's, through the breath control, control of your breathing, intentional breathing, that you can reunite your soul, your consciousness of your spirit with your physical everyday walk in life. And even this in and of itself is an ancient Masonic symbol to me, because there are the 3 degrees of craft masonry are the first 3 degrees. And that's basically what I've comprehending about the first 3 degrees. It's about taking care of your mind, body, and your soul. And that's what I see right here is the unification of your mind and your body, or your soul and your body, through control of your breath. Now, getting down to the brass tacks. In my book, Symbolically Speaking, I break down, because I did my dissertation work on rites of passage, culturally centered rites of passages, and how it reduces at-risk sexual behavior and substance abuse behaviors, right? And so there's a brother Goggins. He's a past president, I believe, of Association of Black Psychologists, but he does a lot of work in rites of passage. And so I was looking at the correlation between rites of passage programs and Freemasonry, Freemasonic initiations. And so I drew this chart. So one of the first points is that rites of passages provide a lens of perception or a cognitive framework in which to view the world. And again, you get this in the allegories of history and the current rituals and degree work in Masonry. It does the exact same thing. It provides the framework, right? It provides the lens. And through this, it's of course, right now, the way that I've experienced it from the Western perspective. But if we took that and we put the African worldview and African perspective on it, I mean, we'd be blowing it out the water. So like, instead of the current allegories, if say, for example, we were using the Pataki, from Ifa, the stories of the Orisha, or if we were using the stories of the Neteru instead. The second point, delineate standards of evaluation by which to measure worth or legitimacy, beauty, and truth. This is found in our various proficiency exams, our memory work, science tokens, obligations, and Tyler's oath. So it's almost like a point-for-point correlation, except it's happening over here under this particular framework, but it is still, for all intents and purposes, a rite of passage. Number 3, define the conditions and the means that motivate or stimulate a member, institutional or individual, of society, and prescribe sanctions for the disruptive digressions. So in the Masonic Lodge, brothers are motivated by their desire for more light found in the higher degrees, and the quote-unquote higher degrees, and sanctions are illustrated by our penalties and implemented by the internal judiciary process. So again, there are motivations, there are stimulations to go forward, to be a part of society, to be a member of society, and it comes with its rewards as well as with its punishments. The 4th point, define collective and individual identity, roles, and responsibilities. So in the Masonic Lodge, there are various stations, various people that are responsible for various things. And not only that, you also have these various houses that exist. And so there are various roles, responsibilities, and identities that come with being a Prince Hall Mason, just as with our traditional rites of passage programs. The 5th point, it provides a common language or means of communication. Again, symbolism, degrees, signs, and tokens, all of that is a form of communicating. I could do this whole presentation and be talking about stuff, and unless you are a Mason or knowledgeable about, our signs and symbolism, a lot of stuff would just go right over your head. 6, provide the basis for social organization. Again, the existing protocol, constitutions, and volume of sacred laws provide for this. Number 7, condition the mode of production. If the various Masonic committees oversee productivity. Again, point for point. And the last point on this particular slide, delineated process for perpetuation of the culture. By continuing to initiate, pass, and raise more brothers via the prescribed rituals and degree work, the Masonic culture is perpetuated. And it goes on and on and on. There is a point for point correlation between our traditional rites of passage and the current Masonic initiation experience. And again, my thing that I'm pushing is for us to have a worldview shift, a shifting in our worldview that would allow for us to approach the Masonic Lodge from the African worldview, which then changes everything. I was fortunate enough to have been initiated into two African spiritual traditions prior to being initiated as a Prince Hall Mason. And then I joined another one after. And so I've seen the African spiritual, like the authentic African initiation processes, gone through those, and then gone through Masonic initiation, the whole, got the degrees in Freemasonry as an African initiate, looking at it through that lens, and then going on to be initiated into another African spiritual tradition after having become a Prince Hall Freemason. In fact, the Babalawo, that initiated me as Omo Olokun, he was actually a Freemason, as well as a Knights Templar. He went all the way to the Knights Templar degree on the York side. And so when he told me right before I went in for my Ifa initiation, that once I came out, he was going to show me some things, right, as it relates to the utilization of Ifa in conjunction with Freemasonry. And then I further learned about certain ways that our rituals in Freemasonry, or symbolism and rituals, are used by the brothers in Trinidad, and how some Trinidadian brothers, I know somebody from Trinity that was here, who there's got the strong Shango tradition there, but they actually use the Masons in Trinidad, the Black Masons in Trinidad actually use their Shango spiritual orientation and worldview and apply it to the Masonic craft and get phenomenal results. The work that I learned on how to couple the two, and then the other things that I've on my own have created and started utilizing from my own African worldview. I mean, it works like a charm. It's literally like a charm, right? It's like, some of us that are in the Ifa tradition, we know how to, we know how to make the offerings and things of that nature. If you're part of the Akan, or if you're part of your Saraset, whatever spiritual tradition, African spiritual tradition, we have works that we can do. And my thing is, the more tools that you have in your toolbox, the more likely you're going to be prepared for any and everything that you come across. So when I was studying with Saraset, we were orienting more along the lines of our psychological and spiritual power, right? The use of our own spiritual will to manipulate and manifest in reality. In the Ifa tradition, we do that, but we also are using physical means such as ebo, making offerings and things of that nature to get the works done. If you look at some of the Southern traditions, I used to make gree bags for people, and the gree bag was like a little satchel with certain ingredients in it, right? But again, it's the spiritual works, but it would be applied to the tools and the framework and the whole institution of Freemasonry. Again, as we continue to climb and as we continue to develop ourselves and reclaim all of these bits and pieces of our ancient spiritual and empowering traditions, my thing is leave no stone unturned, right? Reclaim it all if you can, right? Go in and get as much as you possibly can, especially when you have the intention of what? Empowering yourself and breaking free of these oppressive chains. Going into this correlation with George G.M. James. So the first degree of Freemasonry is called the Entered Apprentice. And in George G.M. James' tradition is called the Mortals, right? And so this will be a part where I'm going to go to the text and I'm going to read a little bit out the book, if y'all don't mind. And so, according to George G.M. James, there are three distinct levels of initiation within the Kemetic spiritual systems. He refers to the first degree of initiates as the mortals. These are individuals who are just beginning their instruction, gaining information about the deeper mysteries of creation. They are called mortals because they have yet to realize their conscious experience, the mortal aspects of their being, i.e. the immortal aspects of their being, the spirit. At this level, the initiates were given tasks designed to heighten their understanding of their daily life experience. These tasks helped to distinguish the physical experience from the mental and the spiritual. Control of the physical, specifically those automatic and reflexive functions, was the goal. Conditioning such as response to hunger, lack of stillness in regards to body movement, endurance under extreme temperatures, and other forms of discomfort, control of breath and breathing, heart rate and body temperature, as well as the suppression of the startle response, were all key to growing beyond this level of initiation. So in a nutshell, it was almost like the shower before getting into the pool, right? It's like the orientation period, if you will. And I'm speaking specifically to what George G.M. James is saying. And so it's at the very first level of your initiatory experience to where you're literally being tested to see if you are actually ready for this. And so, you go through what you go through in preparation, and you actually go through what you go through for the purpose of development and elevation, right? And so some of our ancient symbols that reflect that, this is the mummification process. And the mummification process was designed to take those mortal and perishable elements and render them immortal. And which is why, those grave robbers, they could go over there right now and pull a body out the ground that's been there for thousands of years and it's still intact. It was the rendering of that which was corruptible, right? Corruptible meaning, and that can go through destruction. It can be decayed, rendering that indestructible, right? Rendering that incorruptible. And that's the first phase when you're coming in. You want to be able to shed any and everything that you can be manipulated through. So that's your emotional response. That's nobody can hold food over your head and make you crack, under pressure of not eating because you fast anyway. You get your physical body together. You're taking care of your physical health as much as you possibly can, at least have your intention in that direction, and minimize the harm that you will inflict upon yourself, right? And another thing about, the early stages of initiation, and this is from the African worldview and African perspective, is that your physical body is not just a body. We said we're only human. It's not just a body. This is a divine vehicle that's designed to give you your tangible experiences in this physical world. So it's the medium through which you engage the physical world. And our ancient ancestors, image on the left, understood this, and they made the temples to reflect the human body. And if you read anything about R.H. Schwaller de Lubbock's or his wife Aisha Schwaller de Lubbock's, you'll see that in these various rooms in the temple, that he was able to discern that this was the human body, because the joints in the stonework would literally, the joints, meaning that where the two stones connect, would literally be at a certain part of the human body. And so in these outer temples, it was in the lower leg. And I'm paraphrasing. And this particular level would be at the same level of the body. If it's joints here in this particular temple, it would be at the neck on all of this humanoid images on the wall and so forth. And so he was like, well, wait a minute, this temple is actually laid out like the human body. And here's something that I came across in some of my spiritual growth and development work that showed that, the ineffable word for God, the tetragrammaton, if stacked a certain way, it actually imitates the human body. This brings to life the statement of Jesus. Is written in red. Look to your neighbor, say, neighbor, written in red. Jesus must have said it. It says, doesn't your book say that ye are gods? And so this is the image of God, man, right? God, man, and God, woman, which is something that Ron Nephron Man talks about all the time. It's the development of your spirituality to the level to where you are God, man, and God, woman on earth. The way that Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. says it, he calls it universal man and universal woman. But it's the same concept. It's the idea of developing yourself, beyond thinking and believing and functioning as if you are quote unquote only human, and tapping in to those deeper levels of who and what you actually are. The next degree is the fellow craft degree. That's the second degree in Freemasonry. But according to George G.M. James, it's called the intelligences, right? So he says initiates at the next stage, according to George G.M. James, are called the intelligences. These initiates are in the process of developing their newly found tool, the mind, whereas in the first stage, they were introduced to the mind by juxtaposing it to the experience of the physical body. The intelligences work specifically to develop the ability to know beyond the physical senses through the development of what is called nous by Greek philosophers. The nous is loosely described as an inner knowledge or inner knowing and awareness, a sort of intuition based on discernment and an innate ability to determine reality from fantasy, a direct experiencing of truth. With this talent, an initiate is capable of looking beyond the surface of a situation and thus recognize the truth within. This is very important. The level of insight gained allows the initiate to base their decisions on truth by passing the youthful but sometimes confusing indicators provided by the emotions and physical senses. So I know that's a lot. I said a lot. All right, Doc, you done said all that. What that mean? I know y'all comprehended. So let me go back and pull up something. So when you're looking at this whole concept of being able to see past the surface, to embrace the inner truth, to discern falsehood from reality, in today's day and time, it's very important for us because technology is off the hook. I saw a video the other day where it looks like a portal opened up on a beach in the air and a big old sperm whale swam out of it. And it looked real. It looked like it was actually happening, right? So technology is such that right now our minds are easily fooled into believing that what? Falsehood, fantasy is actually reality. And so without that ability to mentally discern those things, we can get caught up in all kind of mess. And many people are caught up in all kind of mess. Anything that they got to call reality, like reality TV, please believe that it ain't real, right? But it's so much like social media, these skits, people are starting to stage now these conflicts and contradictions, these conflicts and dramas, right? And I can't stand it because you can tell because the people they use a certain acting voice and the camera angles are always a certain way. So you need to be able to discern falsehood from reality. One day I was thinking, I was writing practical psychology, and it came to me that when I was dealing with police shootings and how a large percentage of the police shooting videos that we get are either from somebody who happened to be there with a pocket computer, a cell phone, or off the police body camera footage itself, right? And to me, I was like, well, wait a minute, that's very, very intriguing. As Dr. Wells would say, that's interesting. And I say that because it lets me know that sometimes that these can actually be staged events, meaning that something that you might see as a police shooting, the victim and the perpetrator could both be actors, and the whole thing contrived just to set off your emotional state. Remember what I said, that with this intelligences or that second degree, as George G.M. James talks about it, one of the main things is to control your knee-jerk reactions, right? Your emotional responses to things. But right now, people are so emotionally on edge, it's very easy to manipulate folks. Like if I had the resources, I could send y'all in the street marching tomorrow. If I could just create a believable video footage of some innocent Black person getting shot by a cop, I could send y'all out to the streets tomorrow rioting. Not y'all, of course, but the people that ain't here watching the presentation right now, they would do it. And so this is about being able to discern between reality and falsehood. So I said that either the victims or the perpetrators are both actors. Whole thing is a setup. The victim is real, but the perpetrators are intentionally setting out to murder or harm somebody for the purpose of getting some footage to make it viral, to set off a reaction, or the entire thing is absolutely real. It was a real situation that just happened to happen and somebody happened to record it. But then it's still the intentional sharing and putting it on the news and sending it through social media that's still designed, to get people riled up and to get a reaction out of people. And so once you develop past a certain level of your humanity, then what you're able to do is discern between, the reality and the falsehood. But also, if it is real, you're also able to discern the motive behind the reality, which then makes you less likely to react to it. Then you can formulate a response, because there's a clear difference between responding and reacting, right? And so I'm making this very, very practical because it's important for us to understand the power and how applicable these powers are, because the powers are like, oh, it's like some old spirituality up in the sky, you meditate on, but when you come up out the clouds, you got to put your feet back on the ground. And if you cannot apply all of the spiritual lessons and development that you're dealing with and going through back here in this physical world in your day-to-day life, then you might need to check on what you're actually doing, because you might just be wasting time and resources for real. If you can't apply it to your everyday, you might not be doing something right, or you might just be doing the wrong thing altogether. And that's why I'm trying to draw these real world correlations back to, our everyday movement. So the development, I know plenty of y'all have seen me show this plenty of times. I don't even know who's really in here. I see it's 211 of y'all. So I figure somebody in here I know. And so y'all have seen this. Dick Gregory actually pointed this out to me. Me and Baba Dick Gregory, we was riding in Nashville. I was actually taking him to the airport. And we were riding in the van, and a FedEx truck was in front of us. And he said, baby, you ever seen the arrow in the FedEx logo? I said, no, I ain't never seen it. And he get amp on it. He said, it's right there in front of you. And like the FedEx truck was in front of us. And I was like, oh, snap. There is an arrow in the FedEx logo. And I know plenty of y'all have seen it before, but there's somebody looking at this FedEx logo right now and still does not see the arrow embedded in this logo. This is that hidden in plain sight stuff. This is that evidence that we can still increase our awareness and our consciousness so that little slick stuff like this does not get past us, right? Here's the arrow right here for whoever still hadn't seen it. It's right here between the E and the X. So nobody is seeing this FedEx logo for the first time, but somebody is seeing this arrow between this E and the X for the first time. It's right here. So this is when you do the second level of development, right? And you become what George G.M. James was translated as the intelligences, then you are more cognitively astute. You're more cognitively aware. You start to see the correlation between this hopscotch board and the tree of life, right? Called in the Kemetic science, the Puat Neteru, right? And if you Google hopscotch and Judaism, or if you just Google Jewish and hopscotch, you'll see the full story. This is not a reach. This is very much real. That is what this is. And it's a particular holiday or a particular occasion that this takes place, that the children play this specific game or perform this specific rite or engage this particular ritual that, again, is symbolic of the Yetzir Sephirah or the tree of life or the Puat Neteru. It's right here hidden in plain sight. I know most people in this group have probably played hopscotch. If you're Black, you likely played hopscotch. And if you're from the hood or in the city, we took our chalk out and we drew the hopscotch board. I don't know who taught us how to draw the hopscotch board or how it came to be the game that we chose to play, but we did play the game. And here it is right here in plain sight. It's a tree of life. It's a tree of life diagram on the ground. And you're going from sphere to sphere from the bottom. So this would be 10 if it was laid out according to the actual tree of life. It would be Malkuth. You go all the way up to Ein Sof, which is above Kether, right? But that's what this is. It's amazing. But this is what developing that next level of cognitive and intellectual and mental awareness and capability and capacity would do for you. You would be surprised by less stuff. More of the stuff that's hidden in plain sight will come clear to you. Like, for example, I remember I saw this speech and I said, whoa, that looked familiar to me. And so I went back and I was like, I know what it was. It was the purge, election year. There was one of the purges was called election year, right? And you got to make this stuff up. Shout out to Tony Browder, who's a major movie analyst. I mean, you know, I got my desire to start analyzing movies deeper from Tony Browder and my brother Coach Powell. But look at this. The hidden in plain sight stuff is no longer hidden to you once you begin to develop a certain level of cognitive and mental awareness. And I didn't make this. I took the screenshots, of course. But this is very real. It becomes plain to you. There is no question anymore about, is it something there? You automatically assume that there is, and then you set about trying to figure out what it is. Too many of my intellectual brothers spend what I would say too much time debating if something is. Mr. Fuller says it all the time. He said, no. He said, expect that. You know, he talks about the maltreatment at the hand of potential racists and actual racists. He says you should never be surprised. He said you should always expect the mistreatment, and you know, not expecting it in a way to where you're gonna manifest it for yourself, but expect it so that you're always on guard, psychologically, physically, emotionally, right? You're always on point, which then makes you less susceptible to these subtle imagery and subtle messages seeping into your psyche and influencing your behavior on that level. See, again, it's a purpose behind initiation. It's not just to join some club. It's not just to join a fraternity in the case of Freemasonry. It's not just to wear your Ide and your Eleke or your Uchad, if you know. It's not just about that, but it's actually about cultivating and developing yourself so that when you are moving in your day-to-day world, you are functioning as the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. And you cannot be the best version of yourself without your psycho-spiritual development. It is virtually impossible. That's why you got people out here that are financially well off, but they are miserable, right? You got people out here who have 50,003 degrees, miserable, not a lick of common sense and non-social skills. It is a holistic process that is our nature, right? It is our legacy to adhere to holistic perspectives, holistic worldviews, and a holistic approach to any and everything that we are approaching. And so again, if we took our holistic orientation and applied it and inserted it within this global system, we would begin to have a reach. It's almost like amplifying your voice with a megaphone, if you will. You know, first you do your voice training. You make sure that your voice is appropriate, i.e. African spirituality. And then you apply that through any type of amplified mechanism that you possibly can. And of course, it's the story of the blind men, everybody touching a different piece of the elephant and describing what they have and thinking that like the tail is a snake, the leg is a big tree trunk, right? The nose is, I forgot what they said the nose was, and the ear was like a big leaf or whatever. And so it's the same thing. It's hidden in plain sight. But if you don't cultivate and develop the mental aspect of yourself, which, you know, relates to both the second degree in Freemasonry and the intelligences, then what you have is a limited perspective of reality. You have a fragmented perspective of reality, and you will begin to function like the fragmented entity, Yorugu, that Mama Marimba pointed out to us. It's a fragmented entity, it's a fragmented worldview, it's a fragmented way of engaging reality. And fragmentation is always limitation. And just more on the ineffable word of God. And then that third degree of becoming a master mason, George G.M. James calls the third step the creators or the sons of light, right? So let me get to this real quick. So the creators and the sons of light. So on this particular level, the creators and sons of light are the people who are literally capable of mastering reality to the degree to where they seem to be quote unquote magical. You ever been with somebody or in the presence of somebody who seems to be quote unquote lucky all the time, or somebody who's able to speak into existence and speak into reality the things that they are going to manifest and experience for themselves, and you actually see it working. That person who is always able to get their parking space, that person who is always able to see deeper into a situation, that person who literally is a creator, right? Is a son or a daughter of light, that person who can come into a space and help to correct and put things in order, right? That person who you can always holler at and get with to gain a deeper level or next level of insight. These are the creators. They're walking in the world and not necessarily being of the world. It's the story of Jesus, actually. Jesus would be considered a son of light. Jesus would be considered a creator, of course. And so when we look at some of the imagery that goes along with this, for example, y'all know what this is. On the left, these are the sutures of the skull. And on the right, this is Khepra. So what would be the correlation between Khepra, the beetle, and the sutures of the skull? Khepra is the ever becoming, right? It's the ever creator. It's like what Genesis translates to. Genesis is not the beginning. Genesis are beginnings. And Khepra, is the ever becoming, right? And so it's perpetual creation, perpetual creativity. And that's what you have encased in here is the brain, which is, to me, is the switchboard for the mind. The brain is not where the mind is itself, to me, from what I'm coming to understand. The brain is like the switchboard. It's like the relay station. It's where the mind is able to engage and manipulate the body, right? This is where it happens through the brain. And that's where the central nervous system comes into play. You got your brain, you got your spinal column, and you got the peripheral nervous system that branches off of that. And it's through this mechanism that your mind is able to manipulate your body. For example, we can't see you, so just go on and do it. We can't see you. Just think with your mind that you want to take your right index finger and put it on the tip of your nose. So you had the thought first, and then your body responds, and you move your body accordingly, right? That's the mind. This is the creative center, right? That's why it's symbolic of Khepra, the ever becoming. It is perpetual creativity. And so the sons of light or the creators have developed themselves to a point to where they're literally able to distinguish. Remember, the second degree was about furthering. First degree was about juxtaposing your mind and your soul against your physical body. The second degree was strengthening that mind that you have now set a distinction with. And then the third is about mastering it and utilizing your spiritual power, your spiritual force to actually manifest through your mind and your physical body or physical reality as a whole. And so it's a constant climb. It's a constant set of developmental procedures and processes, all of which are designed to awaken certain aspects of you in order that those aspects of you that have been awakened are now under your employment, meaning now it works for you, right? Your creative principle now works for you. And sometimes you will use certain words of power. Sometimes you will use imaginings. Sometimes you would use certain written symbols. Sometimes you would use certain, carved resources, or you make a certain charm. Sometimes you'll use certain herbs, certain oils, certain baths, right? Sometimes you do certain practical rituals and ceremonies, like taking 5 yellow roses down to the river. You might pour out some liquor, depending on who you hollering at. You might pour some gin, you might pour some vodka. You might spew some brandy or some bourbon. It just all depends what you're doing. But these are functions of the highly initiated priesthood that are entrusted with the rituals and the science, the spiritual science that we all have access to if we put in the work to demonstrate our responsibility for handling it. And here again, you will see that, there are the 4 basic elements, and everything that does exist manifests from one of the 4 basic elements. And through this process of initiation, all of us have a specific disposition based on your zodiac sign, right? Air, earth, fire, water signs. But the whole goal is, and I'm working on a book on African personality theory, and part of the understanding, and I learned this through my initiations, is that you want to, even if you have an air disposition or a fire disposition, whatever your quote unquote natural disposition is, you want to do the spiritual work that's going to get you right here in the middle. You want to be centered. So that way, no matter what the situation you find yourself in, you want to what? You want to be able to adapt. So if you're naturally a watery disposition, meaning that you acquiesce, you go along with the flow, you're very amicable, you take the shape of whatever container you find yourself in, you adapt to your situations. But you're in a situation that requires fire, right? So if you're watery in a fire type situation, you might not be able to step up to the challenge. But if you are here centered, even with a watery disposition, or if you're trained enough, you can turn on that fire at will. You can turn on that earth at will. You can turn on that air disposition at will. It just depends on what your training is. But some of us are so deep into this limited identity, thinking that we've got to adhere to the one zodiac sign that we think that we are. And then some of us get all smarty-arty and think that, oh, well, that's my moon sign. This is my sun sign, so we can do moon and suns. And some people get even more bougie with it and start talking about the various houses and what the juxtaposition and the conjunctions, and we start doing all that stuff, which is dope. What I'm saying is that in all of that, you want to be flexible and versatile, right? And that comes through training. And it's kind of like the cartoon, the Avatar, with Avatar Aang, right? Where his disposition, he's an airbender by nature. But a part of becoming the Avatar or awakening his divine self or getting centered was he had to go around to all the other nations and find him a master teacher so he could master the other elements. So then what? He's now evolved enough. He's actualized his potential to the point to where he can what? Now he can function as an avatar and manifest any of these four elements as necessary and as required. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about our African spirituality, our African initiation systems, and why I push so hard that we need to reclaim our stolen legacy. It's for us to do it, because anything less than that, we're not going to have what we need to get up out the situation that we're finding ourselves in. So in addition to those three levels of initiation, checking the time, in addition to those three levels of initiation, George G.M. James talks about 10 virtues as well. And I'm not going to have enough time to go through all 10 virtues. I detailed them though, and if you don't have a copy of Symbolically Speaking, you can find my breakdown and my discussion of all these in there. But the first one is the control of your thoughts, which is very important. I'll talk about each one, but I'm not going to have to be able to do too much depth with them. But control of your thoughts. Now, again, a lot of this sounds very elementary, but if you ever tried to control your thinking, right, it could be a very difficult thing, because especially if you have like an airy disposition, because air, kind of wind is blowing, it's just going from one direction to the next all the time. Those are like consistent with a lot of our thought patterns. The controlling of your thought, one of the exercises that we utilize to control our thinking is the tool of mantras. And so if you never knew that mantra is like mind protectors. And so it's the Hail Marys with the rosary bead, Hail Mary for the rest, Hail Mary for the rest. We say Hail Marys over and over again according to the rosary beads. Or if you see the Islamic prayer beads or the Buddhist prayer beads, and you chant for each one of those beads, right? And the purpose of that is to control your thinking. So if you occupy your verbal mind with a verbal saying already, right, in your mind, then it's very difficult for some other verbal thought to be manifested at the same time. And it's very important, especially when you are in a very spiritual place, like you're praying and you're trying to accomplish and achieve a particular goal. You don't want to be praying for wealth and prosperity, and then all of a sudden, the thought of all the bills that you got past due creeps into your mind. It's a sacred space that you're in, and you're literally supposed to be developing your life force and directing your spiritual power towards this end result. And so if when you're doing that, if you're in that sacred space in your prayer closet and you are cultivating this spiritual frenzy, the spiritual energy, and then them bills creep in, now your life force is being redirected towards that which you're trying to get away from. And so controlling the thoughts is really that important, and also because what you think, you ultimately and eventually will become without the proper perspective. The next is the control of action, and that's that's like, duh, you just control what you do. And if y'all remember in Dr. Woodson's work, The Miseducation of the Negro, he talked about if you control a person's thoughts, you don't have to worry about their actions at all. See, this is all high level spiritual initiation and cultivation stuff. This is science here. Control your thinking, control your actions, right? Control your actions. Next is the steadfast of purpose, meaning that you focus in. If you have a goal, you buckle down and you achieve that goal. Identity with the spiritual life or the higher ideals, meaning that, some people who have no idea about spiritual reality, right? But you can identify with the spirit within you, as we talked about in the earlier, when we talked about the stage of initiations, and higher ideals, meaning that you never settle for the low level experience. You never settle for the low level interpretation of things. Number 5, evidence of having a mission in life. The evidence is, everybody has a mission, but having the evidence of it that you can point to means that you are aware of that mission. Evidence of a call to spiritual orders of the priesthood and the mysteries. And these 10 virtues, as you are able to achieve and accomplish these things, or as you continue to grow and develop, these things become more and more aware to you. I'll never forget, but when I knew that I was supposed to be initiated in the Ifa. And I also knew that my Ori was governed by Olokun. Olokun was my Ori. And then I also knew that I was supposed to be initiated as a priest of Olokun. I knew this. I didn't do any reads or anything. And I sat with my Iya and my Ifa family, and they did the reads and everything. And yeah, it came back to Olokun govern my head. And that was the particular track I was supposed to be initiated into. I knew these things. And because the word came to me and I was lucid enough in my own mind to hear it and to be receptive to it and to walk as if that was the case, it was eventually demonstrated that voice was correct, right? And so that's part of my evidence of a call to spiritual order to priesthood. Freedom from resentment. This particular one is very powerful as well, because what you'll find is along the way, as you're growing and developing spiritually, people will begin to drop out of your life. People will begin to hate on you. People will begin to even try to sabotage you, to try to get you to quote unquote backslide. Look to your neighbor and say, neighbor, backsliders. They want you to backslide. They want you to fall off and continue to do the things that they do because it makes them feel better and more comfortable. And when you don't, people can develop resentment for you. When you are being successful in life, if you were trying to drop some weight, if you were trying to stop smoking, if you were trying to stop cussing folks out, whatever it is. And as you start to become successful in meeting these goals, people who know you when you were the other way can start to resent you. And so you want to be freedom from resentment from their resentment, meaning that you don't want to ever feel negatively about your growth and development and the things that had to be shedded, right? You don't want to resent, you don't even want to resent the people who are resenting you. You want to stay level. You want to keep your eyes on the prize and stay focused going forward. Next one is confidence in the power of the master teacher. A lot of times we like to second guess things. And the ultimate master teacher is your own soul, your own spirit, your own Ori, right? And so when you are confident in that voice, that inner voice, when you can actually hear it and you're confident in following its guidance, then that's going to demonstrate that you are now ready for some next level experiences, some next level power. And so that to me, I've gotten that voice. I talk about it a lot in the book, but there's been several instances where I've heard that master teacher's voice, whisper into my ear. And it's always a whisper. It's always very quiet. And, it's probably what we call, what most of you would say, man, something told me not to do that. Dang. Or, man, something told me to look over here. I'm glad I did because there was a $50 bill down there. Whatever it is, that's something that tells you. That's the master teacher. That's your Ori. That's your spirit. That's your ancestor. That's God. Whatever label you want to put on it, depending on what it is, that in some way, shape, or form is a version of a master teacher for you. And the more you start to follow that, the louder it becomes, the more confidence that you develop, the more confidence that you demonstrate in it. So if you sit down a jar, like here with my big old jar of water, right? If I sit my jar down on the counter and something in my head says, man, it's gonna fall. What I do now is I go back and I get it. I may never know if it's gonna fall at all. Just like in the Matrix when he knocked the vase down, and the Oracle, she said, "Don't worry about that." He said, "Don't worry about what?" He's like, "He knocked it over." It's like that vase. Don't worry about it. And she said, "What's going to really cook your noodle?" I think that's what she said. Is you wondering whether or not you still would have knocked it over had I not said anything. You may never know, right? But my point is, when you hear the voice, if you follow the voice, by following the voice, guess what? The voice gets louder, your confidence in it grows, and you realize that this is actually a master teacher guiding me through my day-to-day life. Some of y'all was there at the Thurgood Marshall Center one night after a UNIA event. It was me, Mama Lauren, a couple of Sister Lorene was there. We were just sitting around, just chewing the fat. And a voice whispered, it said, "You're going to get pulled over on your way home tonight." I'm like, word. So I know the voice. So I was like, bet. So now I'm ready to get pulled over. No, I didn't make myself get pulled over. I was forewarned. And so I'm driving up Georgia Avenue. Sure enough, 3 cars back, I seen them. And I was like, that's it. Long story short, they pulled me over. Sure did. Just like my master teachers told me and prepped me for it. Told them have a good night. I went home. I didn't get a ticket or anything, but I did get pulled over. Confidence in one's own ability to learn is number 9. We got so much self-doubt about our ability to achieve. And so getting that out of the way, right? Confidence in your own ability, it allows you to step up and try new things. It allows you to delve deeper into whatever religious affiliation that you currently have. And then the last one, readiness or preparedness for initiation. You've got to be ready, you've got to be prepared. And it's like at that first degree, the mortals, some of that preparatory work, as I've come to understand it, is testing your readiness. It's testing your preparedness, right? Because, sometimes you might think you're ready. Sometimes you might want to do something, but then you jump in and get started and you realize like, man, I ain't ready for all this. I'm not ready to have to wear white every day for an entire year, right? Because, some of us have to do that. I'm definitely not ready to shave off all my locks. I'm definitely not ready to, fast from sex for 2 years. I'm definitely not ready to stop eating meat, whatever the case may be, but it's your readiness or preparedness. And typically there's no negative judgment, because if you ain't ready, you ain't ready. In fact, if you're not ready, it's best to identify yourself as not being ready, because you could really get hurt. If you haven't read Malidoma Somei's Water in the Spirit, read that. I finished that when I was in Gambia. I was in the back of a cab in Gambia, and I finished that book. And I looked up at my driver. I said, bruh, for real, man? I said, you been initiated? And he was calling himself Bob, but his name was Boubacar. I said, Boubacar, you've been initiated? He's like, oh, yes. And so, I had just a whole different, I had a perspective worldview shift. And that was one of my very first initiations with the Jola in Gambia. And man, I mean, it's just amazing and phenomenal work. But if you are not prepared for it, you can actually get hurt by it. I guess I had a little more time than what I thought. I anticipated being able to go through these a little bit deeper, but I will stop here as far as this part of it. And I would love to hear some of the questions that you all have, to be able to respond. I really wish we were in the venue to where we could engage each other. I could see you, I could hear you. But I'm down for however we're going to do this going forward, Sister Ajwa. But also, if you all, I do have an event coming up, Sister Audrey. You said I can also announce an event I got coming up. I'm going to be working with Brother Tashango and Billy Shaka, and we're going to do a self-defense class. We're putting together a self-defense series. Some of y'all were in attendance at the one we did at Thurgood Marshall Center, but we're gonna bring Brother Tashango together and do some very practical training on self-defense. If you want to get in touch with me, this is my email address, drjeff@mindonthematter.com. And then my website is www.mindonthematter.com as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Menzise, for that great presentation. I want to remind everyone, if you do have a question for Dr. Menzise, please type them in the Q&A box. So please type any questions in the Q&A box. That is where I will be going to get the questions. I will ask most questions, other questions, if they're a similar topic, I will try to combine. And I just want to note, some people have already asked about access to this video. So it is being live streamed right now on Facebook on Tony Browder's page, and it will also be available on the IKG, on the IKG Cultural Resource page. And so you will be able to access the video there. Also, just want to make sure everybody, please, write down Dr. Jeff's information if you would like more information about his topics, about what he does, about any upcoming programs that he's having. And if you want to make a donation, I know Dr. Jeff, you didn't ask for this, but if you wouldn't mind if you have a PayPal or a Cash App and folks want to donate, if you don't mind adding that to the chat, so that people who feel so inclined to offer a donation for your great work, we just want to make sure we offer that up. Shout out to the folks still coming in from all over. We have some folks from England in here, I saw. So just want to shout you all out. Trinidad and Tobago, again, is in the house, and someone by way of Haiti is here. So we're just all over. So let's start off.
Sister Ajwa, let me.
Yes, if you.
I want to apologize. I'm looking at the chat now. I wasn't looking at the chat during the presentation, but some were saying that I was talking too fast. My bad for that. I do that sometimes, and it's because I'm always trying to be time conscious, and it sometimes slips my mind that I can talk really, really fast. And so my apologies for anybody who that didn't jive with. My bad on that. It wasn't intentional. I was trying to be time conscious, and I don't have any cues in this particular format, so I couldn't pick up on it or even ask. I typically would check in with people, but so my apologies, my sincerest apology on the front end for that. And I want to say what's up to my peoples out there too. I see you, top man.
Awesome. So our first question coming from Jay Thomas. Can you please show the Kemetic zodiac? Um, I don't think you had an image of it, but I don't know if you want to speak to the Kemetic zodiac.
Um, so the Kemetic zodiac. Let me stop. I guess I can stop share screen real quick. Uh, so can I show the Kemetic? So what you would do is just look up the Temple of Dendera. I'll put the words for it in the chat. And then you could Google that, and the images will come right up. I believe that's how it's spelled. So if you just look up the Temple of Dendera, that's what you'll see. But basically, it was the same similar, thing that we're dealing with now with the zodiacs, where the sky is seen as a circle, right? And there are very particular clusters of stars, specific clusters of stars that are identifiable with certain real things like animals, if you will, or different various plants, animals, things of that nature, people, mythological people or gods. And what happens is that those are considered to be various stations in the sky. And with those various stations, you have a very particular influence that comes from that cluster of stars or that station, or the Kemetic word Sabah. Shout out to Baba Ace the Hillier, for Sabah, the reawakening of the African mind, is a star, which is also considered to be portals. And so these portals, these clusters of stars, these constellations, are energy configurations, if you will. And each of these energy configurations, depending on when they are aligned with whatever they're aligned with, will send that particular energy down to the earth or to the atmosphere as a whole. And so it's the same concept of the zodiac that we currently use, but it's just using the Kemetic symbolism or the ancient cultural symbolism, as well as it's more than just 12 zodiac. But we have more than 12 in the Western zodiac as well. We just focus on 12 of them when we're talking about your zodiac sign, your birth sign, and all that type of stuff.
Okay, thank you. And just looking through some of the questions, just FYI, everyone, we do hold Wisdom Wednesdays every third Wednesday of the month. And Dr. Menzies, you are teaching at Morgan State.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're at Morgan State.
And
Okay.
Morgan and Bowie. Teach as an adjunct at Bowie sometimes.
Okay, awesome. Our next question is from Elena. How do women engage with Freemasonry in a meaningful way, being that this is a fraternal order?
Great question. So there are some Masonic lodges that will admit women. I don't know of any Prince Hall ones that do, because part of it is you are supposed to be a man. It's supposed to be able to demonstrate that you're a man, born man. And so from there, there is the Order of Eastern Stars, which is our sister organization. There is a Prince Hall affiliated Eastern Star Grand Lodge and chapters. And so I would strongly, if you are interested in exploring under the Masonic umbrella, the Eastern Stars will be the direction and the way for that. There's a sister, Darnisha Pickett, actually I interviewed her. She has a show called The Labyrinth. And we discussed the other day, and I was, we was talking about from symbolically speaking, and the same underlying spiritual concepts are applicable to both Eastern Stars and Freemasons. And again, it's about your worldview. If you approach it with your African-centered worldview and your African-centered spirituality, because it's supposed to be open to any religious orientation, any religious affiliation, right? And so it don't matter what you're coming in with, as long as you believe that there's God, that God is real, and that your soul is immortal, and both of which are African principles anyway. But if you come into any of these organizations with the African spirituality and African worldview intact, you are destined to be able to go deeper than anybody else in the craft. And you would be able to lift and help to raise our people, because, excuse my English, but we are getting our asses kicked. And as Baba Dick Gregory would say, he said it on Warriors Rise, shout out to Ayana Gregory, her song Warriors Rise, he said, playtime or recess is just about over. It's time for us to quit playing. We've got to employ every single tool that we have at our disposal. And again, this is just one of the most wide-reaching organizations. I have a dream to where, we're going to just start bringing in droves and droves of people that are, initiated priesthood, in some of our African-centered orders. And we're going to come into the craft and just return it to back what I believe it used to be. Peace, Sister Charlene, is that? Peace, y'all.
Okay, great, great. The next question is going to be a combination of several questions related to the same topic. So, Patrick Delaney asked, how does a seeker find her way to one of the African mystery systems? And within that, there were also some questions about one finding their own purpose. How does one determine their purpose? How does one get initiated into a lodge or know which lodge or spiritual system to get initiated into? And then finally, will you be able to share resources and guidance to getting initiated into lodges or initiation groups after the webinar? So if your question was related to that topic, it's all in there.
All right, I'll try to get it. How do you find your purpose? There are many ways. I often say that you're being reminded of your purpose because you know it. It's just buried beneath, all of the stuff that you've accumulated over your lifetime. Unfortunately, many of us are not born into cultures and societies that identify our life purpose at birth. The spiritual traditions that I've been blessed and fortunate enough to be a part of, it's a prerequisite. You do that at birth. I found out my quote unquote purpose. I was reminded of my purpose. I was about maybe like 21 years old, initiating at the Osiris Set Society. And one of the first readings that we do, we call it your destiny reading, or your life purpose, or your spiritual life purpose reading. And so I was 21 when I got mine officially. But what happens is that you are always living on purpose, all through your life. Now you're going to stray, you might haphazardly stumble through it, but because your purpose is literally the reason why you are even existing right now, there is so much in your life that is directing you towards that goal anyway, that you have to be in line with it to one degree or another. You might be off, you might be more often on or more on and off, but it's always there. But fortunately for us, our ancestors over generations have been able to maintain our use of these various tools, these divination tools. And some of us have even been fortunate enough to create these divination tools in the spirit of our ancestors, right? So Ron F. Ahmed, he developed the Medu Oracle deck, which is, this book accompanies it. I don't know where my oracles are. I used them earlier, so they're probably downstairs somewhere. But anyway, so we have the Oracle deck that I'm trained in. You have the OB, coconut shells and Ifa. You got the 16 Kawi. You got all type of different divination systems. So what I would suggest, if you are seeking more clarity and a deeper understanding about what your life purpose is, one of the ways you could do it is find your local African spiritual tradition or initiated priest that people trust, that have a value, that have a very strong and healthy reputation in the community, and you check in with that person to get you a reading done. When I was getting my works done, if it wasn't by one of my family members in Osiris Set, I was going to Nana Kwabena to get my works done. All right, and so you find your trusted priest to do your divination, whichever system they're doing it in. Because the results and the outcomes should be, it's coming, Javon. When symbolically speaking, volume 2 coming, it's coming, man. No matter which system is being used, the underlying message should be the same. Was blessed and fortunate, just a real quick sidebar. I did a conference years ago when I was still teaching at Fisk in Nashville. And I had Ron Nefra Shechem and Shechem came in, and he and a local Babalawu, Baba Jabari, Shango Bemi, they sat side by side on stage in Jubilee Hall in Appleton Room. And one of my students volunteered to be the subject of their readings, because I would ask them to demonstrate the power behind African divination systems. So here you go, Ron Nefra sitting on stage using my Medu Netter Oracle deck, and Shango Bimi up there, Babalawu, sitting up there with his Opele chain. And Ron Nefra did the read on one of my students, and Shango Bimi did a read in the same reading. And they did these readings, and the readings came back with the same exact energy. And so what that did, it demonstrated that our African spirituality is very real, and our practical tools are also very real, because not only did the two readings come back, but also the student, who I know very well, it actually matched him. And so it was perfect. It was a perfect display of the power inherent in our ancestral ways. So that's how I would suggest finding your purpose. But also, if your parents are still alive, or if the people who raised you are still around, ask them the types of things that you said you wanted to be when you grew up. Ask them, how were you as a child? Because when we first get here, we're closer to living on purpose than after we've been miseducated or have so much stuff poured into our persons, right? So go back and ask whoever was around when you was little, what were some of the impressions that you had of me? And you're gonna hear consistent stories, you're gonna hear consistent perspectives, and you start taking that and understanding. Then it's for you to be able to extrapolate or take that and apply it to a broader understanding. Like, wow, okay, so you're saying I was always jumping off of stuff. I was never scared, I always failed. I probably busted my head a couple of times and always end up whatever, but I jump right back up. That's a particular energy. That's like a martial energy. That would be like the Ogun or the Heruka energy type of kid. And so that's what's going to help you to fill in the gaps by talking to people that knew you when you were young. So I would say that the questions about the lodge. But there's a saying in Freemasonry said to be one, ask one, right? Because you're not supposed to be recruiting and all that type of stuff out here. But if you were very interested, whether you're talking about going into a tradition, a spiritual tradition, or if you're talking about becoming a Mason or Eastern Star, the one thing I would say about the African spiritual traditions is, your ancestors and God are always listening. And so, you pray on it, you set it as your intention. This is what you want to do. And when you start to get those opportunities to refine yourself, right? If you wake up with a strong sense that you're going to stop doing this or you need to start doing that, follow that sense, right? Start to walk in that way. Start to trust that inner voice. Start to move in a guided and very intentional way. And then what will happen is that eventually you will get right and exact on your path. And as you are moving right and exact on your path, then you will start to see that this path is lined with fruit trees. And all these things are becoming fruitful to you. Every tree is bearing fruit at this point. And then what you'll do is you'll look up one day and you'll be exactly where you intended to go. You'll be a part of whatever spiritual organization was fit for you at that time. You will come across the right person in the line somewhere, you'll overhear a conversation about something. That's what happened to me real quick with the Osira Set Society. I was at Howard and we was at a grad school meeting, and it was just a few of us in the room. And I was reading the Afrocentric Guide to Spiritual Union by Ron F. Amen. And I was sitting there reading it, waiting on the meeting to start. And then a sister across the table who I already thought looked familiar, and now I know I knew her from Nashville, but it was a different life. And she looked at the book and she said, "Oh, you remember?" I said, "Remember what?" She just pointed at the book. I was like, "No, but I need to know where they at." Because I was literally trying to find out more. I had these little meditation tapes that they used to sell all the time. You had some of these ancient books that, some of these original Ron Nefer joints of Star. Man, if you're still in there, I know you recognize these. But they had these meditation tapes that used to come out. And I was trying to learn more. And here she is sitting in the grad school meeting. She gave me the address. And within a week, I was at one of the full moon rituals for the very first time. And it was a Sebek ritual I'll never forget. And the sister that answered the door was Sheket Amsa Masut. And she answered it so sweet and so pleasant. And then when I went in and the ritual got started, she was actually the one that was possessed or carrying. She was, I know you got them tapes, we don't let those go. She was carrying the energy of Sebek. She was literally possessed by Sebek. And so her persona totally changed. And that was within a week's turnaround of me reading the book publicly. So that's without apology on my spiritual quest, read the book, and so I'm in it with Zaina Sakai. And so I'm sitting there reading the book, Zaina, Peep Game, and next thing you know, I'm at a ritual. And I never looked back. That's my family to this day. And so just set your intentions without apology, continue to refine yourself, continue to do better, right? You know what you need to do better, continue to do that. And don't care about the people that's going to send a negative judgment and the hate and all that stuff. I mean, people say all the time, "Oh, you changed." I say, thank you. Because if I didn't change, I'm wasting a lot of time and I'm wasting a lot of money. And we all get greater potential than what we're actually actualizing right now. I'm sorry, Sister Liz. Doctor, please, says, "Doctor, please show the last two books." I thought she was telling me to slow down. uh, that's all I got. Sister Audrey,
Someone
I think
else
these
was
are the books.
also asking for the names of the books.
These
So
two?
perhaps, well, I know you referenced several books. So perhaps if they reach out to you,
Yes.
you can maybe share a book list or of resources
Sure.
that one can utilize in terms of
Yeah.
the information you presented, the books, the information on how to learn more about African spiritual traditions. And
Yeah.
someone else also asked about how to go about joining a Masonic lodge. Um,
Okay.
so another person asked anonymously, can you give a brief history of the Prince Hall Freemasonry and how old is it?
Okay. And so a brief history. So I am not a historian. I rely heavily on people like past master Alton Roundtree or James Morgan III or Brother Tahuti. You know, many of y'all in DC know Brother Tahuti from the House of Kemet bookstore. Those are my history buffs. But what I can tell you is that in the late 1700s, and the date is disputed, but the late 1700s, there were these 15 brothers up in Boston, Massachusetts, who were interested in becoming Masons. And so, you know, they were able to get a white Mason, because it was predominantly white at the time. They were able to get a white Mason to agree to initiate them 1775 or 1778. Yeah, those are the disputed dates, 1775 or 1778. And we've looked at the original records. You know, it's still up to for dispute though. But anyway, thank you for that, Christopher. Uh, but anyway, they asked to become Masons. And one of the white Masons, at first they were rejected and denied. A white Mason said, okay, I'll give y'all certain privileges. So he initiated them. I think they only got to their first degree under this cap, but I don't know. But I know that what they were able to do was very limited, meaning that they could only march in procession and they could only bury their dead Masonically. But they weren't technically allowed to hold lodge meetings and to make other Masons. And so what Prince Hall and the other 14 brothers decided to do, because they were all very politically active anyway. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see that there's a discussion I had last week with a brother, Oscar Allen from the New York Grand Lodge Estate. And he's a very knowledgeable person. But if you go to my page, my Facebook page, J Menz or the real Dr. Jeff Menzise, you'll see it. But you're all very politically active. And so they use that political activism to petition from the Grand Lodge in England, which is the same Grand Lodge that all of the Masons in the United States were beholden to, those that, you know, came up under its jurisdiction. But anyway, they got permission to not only start their own lodge, because they were already African Lodge number 1, but they were officially admitted into the official record of modern Freemasons, you know, under the Grand Lodge of England. And so then they were able to perform the 3 degrees, create new lodges, create a Grand Lodge, and then they began to travel. So if I'm not mistaken, they went from Boston. They either went from Boston to New York or Boston to Philly. But they went and they started traveling and setting up these lodges in other places. And some very famous Masons with the AME Church, matter of fact, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, you know, they were the ones in Philadelphia that were made African Lodge Masons, because it wasn't called Prince Hall Masonry at the time, it was African Lodge Masonry at the time. And they wedded that with the AME Church. And they continued to spread from there, you know, down to New Orleans, here in Cincinnati, all over the place. And it began to proliferate, you know, from that point. And my position on that is that these brothers, they weren't just looking to join a fraternal order. They weren't just looking to join a fraternal order for the political and social benefit. I maintain that these brothers understood what the fraternal order actually was and what it encased, what it encapsulated, and the spiritual tools that were embedded within it. And that, my position again is that that's why they went so hard. Because if you think about who the white Masons were at that time, these were some very powerful people. I mean, you're talking about, you know, George Washington and all them cats, right? I mean, it was that level of people who were founding this country. And so when you see that this is who they were bucking or pushing back against, or becoming Masons in spite of their rejection, then it had to be something that was worth pursuing and risking your life for. That's my position on it all. And so, you know, and so the next part of the question was what? How does one become one? You know, if you know of any Masons, you talk to them. You talk to a Mason and you express your interest, depending on what state you're in, and then they'll point you in a direction either of the lodge or they'll direct you to the Grand Lodge. But then once you express your interest, then you just get a petition. And then once you get your petition, you send in your petition, they vouch for you, they interview you, all that, and then they take a vote to either allow you to begin the initiation process or they reject you.
Okay, great. Ajay asks, could you talk about whether there is a connection between Ma'at and Masonry?
Yep, there absolutely is. I don't know if they were around when I showed the image. I'm gonna go back to my share screen, sis. Uh, but yeah, so when you look at the concept of Ma'at, you know, and the principle of Ma'at and what it stands for, you'll find many of the same principles embedded in the stories of Freemasonry and the lessons embedded in Freemasonry. Ma'at is the foundation for any right and correct thought, speech, and or action that exists in the world. Ma'at is that underlying. So anywhere you have a discussion about fidelity, a discussion about integrity and temperance, discussions about prudence, a discussion about things being interconnected, being interdependent, all of that is a reference back to Ma'at, whether they say it's Ma'at or not, right? Because that's what Ma'at symbolizes, that whole harmony piece. That you have harmony being spoken about in the medical science when you talk about homeostasis or the absence of illness, right? So Ma'at is pervasive. Ma'at pervades everything. There's nothing that exists that is not Ma'at. But on the surface level, yes, some of the same language, some of the same characteristics that Ma'at encourages you to manifest in your life are also encouraged in the Masonic tradition, in the Masonic Lodge. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Ken Walker asks, is there a correlation between the Masonic compass and square and the ancient Kemetic concept of as above, so below?
There absolutely is. Guess I'll go back to share screen real quick. And you can also see it in the Star of David, which you can also see that's actually there embedded in the compass and square. But yeah, it is the notion of as above, so below. So as you see, it's almost like a Star of David if you would just kind of use your imagination a little bit about the points and how they extend. But yes, so if you notice here, you've got one above the other. Then you have a different variation of the same symbol. And then you have the third variation of the same symbol, right? And so some interpret the compass and the square to be representative of the heavens and the earth, your spirit and your trying to find it, that your spirit, which is the heavens up here, Newt, and your physical body, Geb, your soul. And that what you do is you want to gradually get to the point to where you put your body in the proper places. Right now, our body gets most of the attention, if you will, for most people. And it makes sense because we're living in the physical world, but a lot of people live for their body, live only through their body. And so as you continue to grow and develop, right? So that's the as below. As you continue to grow and develop, you understand that there are more subtle aspects of yourself that you can actually utilize to manipulate the physical. So you get to the subtle aspect of your mind, and the more subtle aspect is your soul. So as above, so below. If you understand that correlation, and that's a part of your development of Freemasonry, as you understand that correlation, then you should be able to manipulate your body using your mind. You should be able to manipulate your body or any other physical reality using your mind, using your spiritual power, right? So that's the one of the practical applications of that concept of as above, so below. It lets you know that you can manipulate below in order to manipulate above, or you can manipulate above to manipulate below. And if you know that, then you understand that there are more subtle ways that you can get things done. To me, that's probably at the core of that lesson of as above, so below. And again, yes, it does directly relate to the compass and squares.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then Dr. Jeff, I don't know if you have a few extra minutes to go over a little bit to try to get in a few more questions.
Oh, I got time. Yeah.
Okay, and if so, I might ask if you want to kind of scroll through some of those questions just to kind of pick out maybe two or three that you feel really that you might want to elaborate on. But the next question I want to ask is from Omi Shade. Do you have any information on galactic connections from our higher celestial beings? I guess in relation to um, Kemetic spirituality, Freemasonry, or any other African tradition, any galactic connections?
Um, any galactic connection. So of course I'm familiar with some of the discussion about the Palladians and things of that nature, or Nibiru, Planet X, even what the Nation of Islam talks about with the mothership and things of that nature. I am of the orientation that we are definitely not alone. Shout out to Nas, we're not alone. His song, You're Not Alone. I love that song. But I'm of the orientation that, yeah, we're definitely not it in this universe. And I lean more towards the not, and understanding that we've got origins and relations out there somewhere. So the galactic connection, absolutely. To me, it just doesn't even make sense to believe that this is all that there is to it. Our ancients often talk about, those that came from the sky, right? And I believe our ancestors, because I believe they were much wiser than what we are right now, even with our technological advances. Now, the degree to which we interact with them still, the degree to which they are even aware of us, that part I don't know. But to me, that spiritual connection that I speak about, the ability to engage the Orisha and our ancestors and the Neteru and the other, the Loa, the other spiritual principles that our ancestral cultural traditions maintain connection with. To me, those could very well be, they are otherworldly beings, if you will. And so where that other world is, I don't know. I don't even know what I think about that. I just know that I think it's, to me, it's simultaneously like right here with us, but like just on the other side of a very thin veil. But at the same time, it could also be way out, off the planet somewhere, or it could be very deep down within the planet, at the bottom of the ocean, if you will. And so I'm not closed-minded about the possibilities of that. And I'm kind of like Mr. Fuller on this point, to where it's like, my assumption is that yes, it's real, and until I can do something with it or about it, I'm going to keep functioning, where I am, and constantly try to develop myself to improve myself. And then maybe it requires a certain level of consciousness to finally tap in. And then the question would be, is it a constructive purpose, right? Is it something constructive that we can do and get from having that knowledge and being able to apply it? So I hope I've answered the question, but yes, I do believe that there are others, and that we can link up with these others, and that we might even be in communication with them. That might be that master teacher I spoke about, that whisper that I get sometimes. I don't know the literal origin of that, but I know I trust the source. And I always just ascribe it to my higher self, my Ori, my ancestors, the Most High. It could be any of those things, but I'm sure that it's a righteous source, wherever it comes from. Just on a side note, though, there's this there's a series called Cosmic Slop. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but it was something that George Clinton, he was the host of it back in the day, and Parliament Funkadelic George Clinton. It's called Cosmic Slop, and they had one episode to where they was doing a brown bag test, and the white folks were sending all the black folks away on these spaceships, and they was all lined up on the beach. They had to have a certain amount of melanin, and the aliens, they was like taking black people away. And so that's not here nor there. It's just kind of like something I thought about.
Great. So everyone, I'm going to go over a few announcements, and Dr. Jeff, I'm going to go over the announcements. If you want to look in the Q&A, if you want to pull up the Q&A box and maybe scroll through and find a few questions that you would like to touch upon. Again, everyone's questions will not be able to get answered, but we do want to just give a few additional minutes to allow Dr. Jeff a chance to continue to interact with you all. We thank you for coming out. Again, we thank you all for coming out. And our next Wisdom Wednesday, the information has been placed in the chat, will be on Wednesday, July 21st, featuring IKG's own Brother Yahuwah, who will be speaking on scientific literacy in the age of reason, how you find the knowledge of yourself. So definitely a great continuation from the discussion happening tonight. We also invite you out to the Brother to Brother discussion featuring Dr. Ranoko Rashidi and Anthony Browder, speaking on fatherhood, brotherhood, and their work. That will be taking place this Sunday at 7:00 p.m. And Atlantis just placed in the chat the link to register for the webinar. So please, when you get a chance, register for the webinar. Also go to our page. I'm going to place it in the chat as well, ikgculturalresourcecenter.com. Please click on contact us in order to sign up to our listserv and be made aware of all the various events that we have happening. Also, as a reminder, Dr. Jeff mentioned the Egypt on the Potomac field trips. They are back in session. They are walking field trips. They are filling out fast, selling out. So definitely go to our website to sign up for those field trips. If you're in the DC area, you have family in the DC area, you definitely want to take advantage of this opportunity. And let's see, I think those are all the announcements. Dr. Jeff, mindonthematter.com is your website.
Yep, Mind on the Matter.
Mind on the Matter. I'm going to type that in the chat as well. mindonthematter.com to
Yeah.
reach out to Dr. Jeff to learn more about his work. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to you just to, see if there was a few questions that kind of resonated with you that you may
Okay.
want to answer, and
Okay.
then we'll close out.
All
Thank you.
right. So I see that Tamara Thomas, she asked, can you talk about the rumor that when one becomes a Mason, they have to give up a child, either their own child or one within their extended family? Is there any truth to this? I would say absolutely not. No, no, no. I've never heard that. I've never experienced anything like that. Knock on wood, continue to protect mine. But it's nothing that I've ever been made privy to, nothing I've ever known about. I mean, it's so many conspiracy theorists out there. And again, I don't make light of those that theorize that conspiracies actually exist. I deal with the truth of it. Conspiracy is just anytime two or more people come together to plan something, then they've conspired. We all have conspired to be here tonight. So this is a conspiracy, right? It's not a theory, it's an actual conspiracy. But you got to be careful with all of the information that's floating around out there. I don't know anything of anything like that. I wouldn't be a part of something that's like that requires that. And I know they say that you don't know it going in, but then all of a sudden you're called to task one day and you're forced to do it. I've never known anybody to have to do that. I know elders who have been Prince Hall Freemasons longer than I've been alive, and they've got all their kids intact. They've never had to do anything like that. And it's not that they did it and I just don't know about it either. It hasn't been the case there. Now, but with just like any organization, we could be talking about the Christian church, and you're going to have people in that church that function the way that they do. And it might not be righteous, it might not be holy, it could be outright wicked. And so I do leave room for there to be some wicked people somewhere within the entire fraternity of Prince Hall Free, or not just Prince Hall, but the entire fraternity of Freemasonry. And so are there people in Freemasonry who might lean to that way? I don't know, but it would not surprise me. I do not know anybody who does that, anybody who has had to do that. I've never heard of that being a part of it. A lot of that stuff that's out there is just to me, it's BS, right? To me, that's what I've come to learn. And so I don't ascribe to anything like that at all. Not at all. Old Testament, who was it that was told to sacrifice their son and they put him on the altar? And then God told him to stop immediately. I mean, we can find reference to that in Christianity. Well, that's Judaism, but still, it's the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. Used to it. I don't understand that question. I'm gonna see if I can scroll and find something else, Audrey. There was a question about London. Dr. Jeff, have you been to London? Yes, I've been to London. I did not go to the Masonic Lodge there. Uh, yeah, but they give tours and stuff, absolutely. But yeah, I've been to London, but I didn't go to the Masonic Lodge there. What else? Yeah, 1775 and 1778, right? Those are the two dates.
And Dr. Jeff, I want to also,
Yep.
do you see the Q&A box
Good. No,
next
let
to
me
the
see.
chat? Yeah, I
It's
think
in the
it's
chat.
next to the chat on the bottom. You're going to see next participant number. You're going to see Q&A. If you click on there, you'll be able to see the questions versus the chat.
Don't see Q&A, sis.
Okay, no worries. Now I'll continue asking a few questions.
Okay, yeah, please do.
People were asking, where can you find the 10 virtues?
Those 10 virtues, they're in Stolen Legacy. They're in Stolen Legacy and I do my own interpretation of them in my book, Symbolically Speaking. I'll tell you the exact page in Stolen Legacy, though, real quick. You find them beginning on page 30 of Stolen Legacy. He breaks down the 10 virtues. Yeah, so it's on page 30 in Stolen Legacy. And Symbolically Speaking, if you want to check out, my interpretation, that starts on page 111. That chapter starts on page 111. It's
And
chapter 4.
where can people purchase your books, your oracle cards? People are asking, where can they purchase those items?
Okay, so my book, and so the oracle cards, I haven't created my own oracle cards. I've created some ESP cards though. And you can get my books and my cards and all that type of stuff at www.mindonthematter.com. That's my website. And then you can get all my books and everything right there on my website. I just put it in the chat again.
Okay, great. What is the role of hallucinogenic plants or substances, if any, in Masonry or African initiation?
Okay, so I've never seen it used in masonry. I've gone as far as a 32nd degree on the Scottish Rite side, Council Royal Select Master in New York. And I've never heard of nor utilized any type of hallucinogenics in the Masonic Lodge or the Masonic rites at all. What I have seen is some ancient Kemetic symbolism. Some people say, the image when you see the sister smelling the lotus plant, they have done some chemical analysis of the plant and find that it can be hallucinogenic, and its impact and effect on people. So I do know certain systems of initiation, they do utilize hallucinogenics. And part of the reason for using it is to break down some of those barriers of resistance that exist in the mind, and also to open up and to expand an individual's ability to perceive different levels of reality. And so when so people do use that. There's a very good book that I read. It's called Serpent. What was it? Golly, why am I blocking the name of this book now? I'm gonna look it up real quick, but it's I'm blocking the book. But anyway, it relates the serpent to DNA. I know I won't be able to pull it off my shelf that quick. But I read this thing. I read it probably about 10 years ago. But it's in the line of like Peter Tompkins' Secret Life of Plants and the Secret Life of Nature. But it talks about the serpent and DNA. And it talks about how that's how George Washington Carver, for example, there it is, the cosmic serpent, found it. Okay, yes, the cosmic serpent. It talks about how the DNA and the talking serpent at the Garden of Eden, as well as how George Washington Carver and other mystics were able to communicate with plants. They were saying that it's the actual DNA of the plant that communicates with the DNA in the human body. And this guy talked about how the use of ayahuasca. Yeah, thanks, y'all. I've seen them putting it in the chat now, Cosmic Serpent. Thank y'all. How they use ayahuasca and other hallucinogenic substances to actually travel into the spiritual realm to gather greater spiritual knowledge. So I do know that it's utilized by a lot of people around the planet. Me, myself, I've never used it, and none of my spiritual initiations on the African side, nor on the Masonic side.
Okay, awesome. This is the final question. There's a few related to this topic. So, Hill and several others ask, what are your thoughts on the Rosicrucian order? Is it a better source for occult/metaphysical study than Freemasonry? Or are they the hidden, unmanifest, and manifest arms of the same body? And manifest and unmanifest and body were in quotations. So the Rosicrucian order, what are your thoughts around that as it relates to Masonry, Freemasonry?
So yeah, if I could exchange and dialogue with the person asking the question, I would ask some questions for clarity's sake. But for the sake of what we're doing right now, I am aware that the Rosicrucians seem to, and I don't know, I'm not a Rosicrucian, but they seem to lean more towards the esoteric studies and practices, and they seem to be more open and external about that part, about that aspect of their order and their organization. I am not one, so I don't know. I do know some people that are, though. In fact, if I could, I wish I could get over there real quick, but it's one of Ra Nefer Amen's first books is called The Realization of Neter Nu. And matter of fact, give me 1 second since I'm gonna grab it real quick.
Absolutely, go ahead.
And so in The Realization of Neter Nu, which is the precursor to the Medu Neter, it says something in here. This is one of his early publications. He was still writing as R.A. Strong. But in here, in the very beginning, it actually gives a statement about the Rosicrucian order, which a lot of people don't know about. Let's see if I can find it really quickly. Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the address, matter of fact, was the Rosicrucian Anthroposophic League in New York. And basically there was some type of affiliation there. In closing, this book has been written to serve as a manual of instruction for students at the Rosicrucian Anthroposophic League. Anyone desiring to contact the author may do so by addressing all inquiries and/or correspondences to, him at the Rosicrucian order. And so what you will find is that a lot of our spiritual traditions and esoteric traditions have been maintained under these various labels and under these various organizations and institutions and orders. And what you'll find is that it's very much universal, such as the truth. The truth is very universal. It gets cloaked in different cultures. It gets cloaked in different languages, different orders, different traditions. But underneath it all, it ends up being pretty much the exact same truth, the exact same science, just manifested in that particular way. And so for this to be the precursor to the Medu Netter, written by, Ron Nefer Amen, aka R.A. Strong, it shows that there is a direct correlation between what they're doing over there in the Rosicrucian order and our ancient ancestral spiritual sciences. But again, I'm not a Rosicrucian, so I've been to some of their events, but I've never joined or gone to none of their rites or rituals.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff, again for tonight's presentation. It was definitely well received from everyone in the audience. We so appreciate your knowledge, your wisdom, and your ability and offering to share with us, with the IKG community, global community. So
Right.
we are about to close out. And before we close out, I just want to give you an opportunity for any closing remarks, any final words that you want to leave with us.
No, I just want to say thank you again, Sister Audrey. You call them there. It don't even matter, sis. It's the IKG family, and y'all are family to me. I hope I'm family to y'all.
Absolutely.
Much love to you and all the team over there for all the good work that you're doing, and much appreciation to all of you all for showing up and for participating and for all this wonderful energy. Y'all, this is why I do it. I do it for our people. They say a rising tide raises all ships, so let's get it.
Absolutely. So thank you all for coming out. And again, see you hopefully on Sunday, June 20th, for a special Father's Day treat with Brother Minoko Rashidi and Tony Browder. Again, Atlantis just put the webinar registration link in the chat, and hope to also see you on Wednesday, July 21st with Brother Yahuwah. Brother Yahuwah, again, he will be speaking on scientific literacy in the age of reason, how you find the knowledge of yourself. So thank you all for coming out this evening, and we will see you soon. Be well, be safe, be blessed.